So I'm going to just introduce us and introduce the evening, and then Jyotish will speak for a while, and then I'll speak for a while, and then we'll have time for questions. So, Nayaswami Jyotish, Nayaswami Devi, founding members of Ananda. Jyotish met Swami before Ananda even existed in 1967. And I met Swamiji in 1969, just when Ananda was getting started. And we've been, as Jyotish says, we've been into mischief for a long time. So we've been just helping to get Ananda established in America and in Europe and India, and helping Swami however we can, and do a lot of traveling and teaching and sharing with others. And I don't know what else to say. We've had the great blessing of being disciples of Yoganandaji and being trained personally by his direct disciple Swamiji for many years. And there's no way I can ever express the gratitude I have in my heart for what we've received. And the only way I feel I can be worthy of receiving that is just to share whatever I know with anybody else. So we're just really happy to do that. And do you want to say anything more?
No.
Okay. And then tonight we're going to be talking about how to be happy all the time. Okay. And here's Jyotish.
If you're not happy all the time, or if you've ever had any period in the last 10 years where you weren't happy, I'd suggest you get this book. This is by Yogananda, and it has the keys in it of which we will speak tonight. But it is a wonderful book. So it is How to Be Happy All the Time, and it's part of the Wisdom of Yogananda series that we have, and it is wonderful. It cuts right to the chase, which is what I'll do. So, as Devi said, I'll speak for, I don't know, not quite a half an hour, and then she'll speak, and then we'll open it up to questions. But if there's a burning question while I'm speaking, or something that I say that you don't understand or want a challenge or whatever, raise your hand and we'll do it that way.
We'll ask you to leave.
Yeah, right. So I want to cover basically 3 points, but I want to cover them fairly thoroughly. The first is that if we're going to be happy, the first thing we have to understand is that happiness is inside us, not outside in things. This sounds like it should be very simple. In fact, it is very simple. It's just hard to practice. Part of this is a universal tendency. When God creates this world, He creates it with a flow from a center outward, because God is unity, and in order to create a world, He has to create diversity. And in that diversity, in that very act of creation, there's an outer flow. Now, we're a reflection of God's consciousness, and I'll cover that more thoroughly toward the end. But because we're a reflection of God's consciousness, and because we're part of His creation, we're created in that model where our energy too flows outward. And part of the whole of the spiritual path is to reverse that. Master talked about, when we say Master, we're referring to Yogananda. Master talked about reversing the searchlights of the senses. This is a very difficult concept to get for a while, but we actually create the appearance of reality outside of ourselves because of this outward flow of energy. In fact, everything exists not in its real form. It exists as an expression of consciousness, as an expression of thought. Swami has just written a delightful children's book called The Time Tunnel, and he's just been editing it, so we got the chance to reread it very recently. But in that, he talks about time, which we think of as linear. It goes from the past to the present to the future. But he talks about it as being not linear, but the eternal now with a circular sense of time around it. And so we reach out from the eternal now into something that we think is a progression, and then we leave it, but we can also go back to it. And great masters, Master described time in somewhat the same way. This is kind of mind-boggling. He said that time and events are like frames on a movie reel. And it seems linear to us because those frames are going through the projector in what seems like a linear form, and it's projected on the screen, and so we see what looks like the beginning of the movie, the middle of the movie, and the end of the movie. But in fact, that goes right around back on the reel, and in the movie we can go back and see the same movie again and again and again in the same sequence. Masters can see the whole of the movie all the time, and the movie is life. So it isn't just a movie in a theater. So they see, as Master said in the great poem Samadhi, thoughts of all men, past, present, and future. And so they're constantly, eternally, infinitely conscious. Okay, from that point of our reality seems to be outward and seems to be linear because that's the way God sets up his drama. That's the way the movie director sets up a movie. And so having that sense of linear and expectation and hope and the drama of the movie, Master would take his disciples sometimes to the movie theater and then tap them on the shoulder right in the middle of it and point up to the beam of light that was coming down and say, remember, it's all a play of light and dark. That's all that's going on. One time we were seeing the movie, I don't know if you've seen it, Chariots of Fire. Very nice movie. We were seeing it with Swami, and the drama of it is these two centers on these two athletes who are in the Olympics, and they've put their whole life into training and getting ready to run in the Olympics. And finally, the one hero has run one race, and he didn't quite make it, and he finished third or something like that. And he's so distraught, and his whole life is caught up in winning this next race. And so the scene starts, and it's in super slow motion, and there's music behind it, and he's just straining and straining to win the race. And just then Swami taps us on the shoulder, says, remember, it's all a play of light and dark. Oh yeah, oh yeah. But it was fun. So at any rate, because of this outward flow of energy, we tend to think that happiness lies outside of ourself. It lies in things. And so that we think that by getting things, we can be happy. But the first and most important principle of all is that happiness is not a thing, it is a state of mind. And so it's only our state of mind that will give us happiness or unhappiness. And if we choose to be happy, nobody can take that away from us. If we choose to be unhappy, nobody can give us happiness. Yeah, wow. That is a wow moment, because, and I'll expand on that a little bit, but so we've got happiness as a state of mind. It's not a thing, but we tend to think that things will give us happiness because of this outward flow of energy. And so we attach our happiness to things outside of ourselves, primarily two categories of things: possessions or sensory experiences. And so one of those two categories, they represent the lower two chakras, the energy from the lower two chakras. One of those two categories of things are what we think will give us happiness. And so it's a very odd process. First of all, happiness lies within. Secondly, we are eternally happy as long as we accept that we're happy, but we decide to be unhappy, and moreover, we decide that our happiness is conditional upon either possessions or sensory experiences. And so what that does is it sets up a cycle in our consciousness where as long as we think something outside of ourselves will give us happiness, we chase after that. And sometimes we chase for a long time, and then we get that thing. And by and large, we experience happiness not because the thing gives us happiness, but because the condition that we've set on our happiness has been met for a little while. So an example of this is we decide we're walking along perfectly happy, having a nice time, and a Mercedes-Benz drives by, and we decide that we really want a Mercedes-Benz. I'm using that as an example because this is a true story. For those of you who know Casey Hughes, he told me this. So we work hard, we save our money, or we just go in debt, probably more likely. But so we pre-sell our happiness ahead, and we finally get the wherewithal to get that Mercedes-Benz, and that gives us happiness. How long does that happiness last? Psychologists tell us that getting a big prize like that, usually our happiness is elevated maybe for up to 6 months. In Casey's condition, in his example, he told me he got his Mercedes-Benz and it lasted as long as he drove from the dealer to his garage. That was how long that Mercedes gave him happiness. And so what's really going on here is, isn't it interesting? We set a condition on our happiness, something outside, and then as long as there is a sense of hope, as long as we're chasing that, we think that we're going to succeed in it. And then we get it, and it lasts a little while. But as Master put it, there's only one thing that you can be certain in that process, that all material things and sense pleasures, they promise happiness. The only thing that you can be really certain about is that they always break their promises. And so we don't ever buy happiness. Sometimes we can rent happiness for a short period of time. So happiness is much less like a Mercedes and much more like the parking meter that you have to keep feeding the coins into where you park your Mercedes. Because as long as you're feeding the coins, the happiness quotient doesn't run out, but eventually you get tired of that and you go on to some next thing. So this tendency to reach outside of ourselves for happiness and think that that's going to succeed, that is the first and greatest error that we make. But it isn't as if we make it just from some free-form decision. It's in part the way that God has set up the whole universe. So in this sense, we're predestined to fail until we begin to reverse that process, and that is part of the spiritual path, is reversing that process. One could say, in fact, that the whole of the spiritual path is simply reversing the process of where we find happiness. Because Master said that happiness, the common motivating factor for everyone in this world, is that we want to be happy. Not everyone, everything in this world, everything in creation, wants to be happy and wants to avoid pain. And you can see that motivation from, as Swami put it, the little worm that knows that if it's pricked, if it wiggles away from the pin, it increases its happiness. So it isn't a real rational process. It's just that's what the motivating factor is. So that desire to be happy is constantly a part of the wave of creation, the very fabric of creation. What changes is not that paradigm, not that we seek to be happy and we seek to avoid pain. What changes is gradually we refine what we think will make us happy and what will help us avoid pain. And so we start out, as I said, seeking pleasure outward, or seeking possessions outward, or seeking pleasure through the senses, and then gradually, as we experience what happens in that game, we come, as Master called it, we get a anguishing sense of monotony in seeking that, apparently achieving it, and then losing that. And we do it again and again and again and again and again until gradually, over many, 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 many lifetimes, we begin to see that that isn't going to really help in permanent happiness. As we do that, we begin to seek more refined ways of finding happiness. Now, what are those? Master said that, well, before I come to what's going to give us more happiness, let me add one more piece to the puzzle. By seeking outwardly, it hurts us in two ways, associating happiness with something outside of ourselves. First of all, we have to expend tremendous effort and nervous energy in trying to achieve that. So the chasing of something outside of ourselves basically exhausts our resources and takes away from our ability to be happy, because it's all life force. So one problem is exhaustion and that's why you see people who, I don't know, who live too much outside of themselves. They're always tired. They're always downcast. One time we went with our son to the county fair, and there was a guy running one of these rides, and he was grumpy, and he was like this, come on, get on, come on, get on. And Devi said, boy, that guy's jaded. And our son was about 6. He says, what does jaded mean, Mommy? And she said, well, it kind of means tired. And he said, well, you'd be tired too if you had to run this ride all the time. But he didn't quite cotton on to the deeper significance. But you've seen it in people's faces who live too much outside themselves, and especially if they try to enhance the experiences chemically in some way or another, they just totally exhaust their resources. So that's one problem with seeking it outside ourselves. The second problem, which is even worse, is that we form the habit pattern of seeking it outside ourselves. And that makes us continually restless, because obviously if you're hungry and you think that, I don't know, eating an Oreo cookie is going to satisfy that, you eat an Oreo cookie and you're still hungry, then you eat another one. If that's all you've got, you you keep running around madly looking outside yourself for something that will feed that hunger. And so you create a mental association between chasing after something and your happiness. And if that something that you're seeking, as we have just been hearing, has no possibility of giving us permanent happiness, we set up a kind of a addiction to something that will never fulfill its promises. And so that's the second problem with seeking outside of ourselves. Okay, now what did Master say were some of the cures to this? He said that if we begin to associate our happiness with qualities that originate inside of ourselves, or things that originate inside of ourselves, since happiness lies within, if we, instead of seeking it from things outside of ourselves, seek it from things inside of ourselves, then we have a way of actually finding it. So what is that? It's things like kindness. Kindness originates inside of ourselves and is expressed outwardly, instead of originates outside of ourselves and we're trying to draw it inwardly. So kindness gives us happiness. Unconditional love gives us happiness. Devotion gives us happiness. Joy gives us happiness. And one of the things that he emphasized the very most that gives us happiness is trying to give happiness to others, because that too originates inside of ourselves and it's an offering outside. So here we've turned the energy flow around to its proper and potentially successful mode of expression. So taking something from inside and offering it out to other people is a source of happiness. There's a law of karma, and the law of karma says that the energy that you put out, you always receive back. And so it's very, very simple. What we put out is what we get back. If we put out the desire to help others be happy, the world will conspire to reform itself in such a way that it will try to help us be happy. If we try to take from the world in order to be happy, the world will reform itself in a giant conspiracy to make sure that that doesn't succeed, because it would be spiritually detrimental to us if it did succeed, because it would train us or satisfy the delusion that it is outside of ourselves. So serving others, helping others, having those qualities that are inside of us and give us innate happiness. Others that he listed were imagination, creativity, anything that originates inside, because ultimately even possessions, even sensory experiences are not experienced outside, even though they seem to be. They're always experienced inside the brain. And so even that which seems outside is inside. So start with that which is, that we know is inside, because the other things make us think they're outside of ourselves, but they really aren't. But we know that our creativity or that our kindness or whatever, those qualities are inside of us. Another thing that he said is very, very important is, and he listed this among the top of the things that will help provide happiness, is one, the environment that we have, and secondly, the company that we keep. He said, Devi's going to talk about habits and some of the thieves of happiness, but just to touch very briefly, he said that people who are good people and have habits that make them good people, it's hard for them to be bad. They have to retrain themselves in order to be bad. if we have a habit of happiness, it takes an effort to be unhappy. Isn't that interesting? So one of the things that I'm going to go on to is that happiness is a choice. So if we choose, if we know that our happiness is not dependent on things outside of ourselves, not dependent on the actions of other people, not even dependent, now this is a hard one to grasp, but not even dependent on whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats who are ruling the country. But if we understand that happiness is inside and we keep working on that as a habit, keep affirming that happiness is inside, happiness is a choice, then as that develops into a true habit, it becomes hard for us to be unhappy. But if we do the opposite, then we have to counteract the habit of being unhappy in order to be happy. So I want to talk a little bit more about this sense of choice and what we have. So if our happiness is not outside of ourselves, but it's in our reaction to things, to people, to circumstances, to whatever happened. So our reaction, the thing or the person or the circumstance doesn't make us happy or unhappy, but our reaction to it makes us happy or unhappy. So we choose to react to something in a particular way. One person likes pickles, the next person hates pickles. Why? Because the reactive process has been habitually trained for or against the taste of pickles. And so that reactive process that we have is the kind of conditioner for us. Now, how do we take control of that reactive process? The more outwardly connected or, I don't know, obsessed, addicted to the outward flow of energy in the sense that possessions or experiences, sensory experiences, are the cause of our happiness, the harder it is for us to take control over that. The reactive process actually happens in the spine. There's every time the energy flows in a positive direction, we have the experience of an uplifted consciousness, and along with uplifted consciousness, we have the experience of an increase in our happiness. Ultimately, it'll be an increase in our joy as we bring it all the way inside. But here we're talking about our kind of normal everyday life. So that reactive process of reacting to something according to allowing the energy to rise or to fall. What it means, I like this, the energy rises. I don't like this, it falls. I accept this, rise. I don't accept it, fall. I am happy, it rises. I'm unhappy, it falls. And so that reactive process is always, always going on as long as we're in the ego. One of the aspects of our spiritual path is that it's much more powerful. We have a lot more leverage over our universal state of happiness if rather than to try to control every little thing, I'm going to really force myself now to like pickles. I'm going to work on it. And so we work on liking pickles for however long it takes, and then we've got the pickle thing down. But then we don't like oatmeal, and so on, So you can't get very far by going one at a time and picking up these things and saying, I'm going to retrain my likes and dislikes around that. But if you control the process of liking and disliking, then you cook the whole meal at one time. I've used the example that it's trying to get at these things one at a time is like trying to mow a vast meadow with tweezers. You pluck this one and go on to the next and you pluck it. It's a whole lot better either to get a mower or even better, although we don't like this image up in the foothills, to set fire and let all that stuff burn just like that, and then you're done with it. So if we get control over our reactive process, which is in the spine, so how do we do that? One is that in the practice of meditation, we get control over that. The practice of our spiritual path, especially pranayama and kriya yoga, gives us control of that. And so that's why Swami and Master have told us, be centered in the spine. What does that mean, being centered in the spine? The spine is where, it means the subtle spine, where this reactive process takes place. Be centered in the spine. Take control over your reactions about things, and you'll take control over your happiness or unhappiness. Finally, I'd like to end with the thought that happiness is a kind of a lower octave of the basic nature of who we are. Our basic nature, we are an individualized extension of God. We're the Atman, or the soul. And that individual spark of God, like a cup of the ocean water, contains the same kind of qualities in the cup as the ocean itself. And so our cup of universal consciousness contains consciousness, existence, and bliss. Satchitananda, existence, consciousness, bliss in this. The fact that our innate nature is one of bliss means that is who we really are, and everything else just obscures our basic nature. What that really means in terms of what we're talking about tonight is that we already are happy all the time. We already are happy all the time. We just, for some crazy reason, decide that we'll make ourselves unhappy for a while, and then we'll make ourselves happy and unhappy and unhappy. Reminds me, I'm going to end this so Devi has time. It reminds me of a joke. There are jokes in Italy about the carabinieri, because, anyway, they just make jokes about it. So, carabinieri are a certain kind of national police force in Italy. And I'll tell you why, because Mussolini formed them, and he didn't want them to rebel, so he took them from different areas of Italy so that they had different dialects and languages, so they couldn't communicate with each other. That way they couldn't rebel against him, but it didn't make them very effective. So the Carabinieri have been the butt of jokes for ever and ever. So this joke goes, one of the Carabinieri is driving along, and he says to the other one sitting in the passenger seat, "I'm not sure that the turn signals are working. Roll down the window and look out and tell me if they are." And so the second one looks out, and he says, "Adesso sì, adesso no. Adesso sì, adesso no. Adesso sì." Now they are, now they aren't. Now they are, now they aren't. Now they are, now they aren't. So that's what we do. Are we happy? No, we are. No, we aren't. Now we are. No, we aren't. But innately, in our soul, in our true nature, we already are happy all the time.
Okay. So, Jyotish has been talking about where we can find happiness. And I'm going to talk about what we can do to avoid what Master calls the happiness thieves. So what takes away our happiness? Let's look at that. What dampens down? If happiness is inside us, if it's a choice we make to choose happiness, why aren't we happy all the time? Where there are things that erode our happiness, that the happiness thieves. The first one we're going to talk about is bad habits. And what are they? Not to say specifically, we can all make a list of our own, but it's repetitive actions that create a groove in the brain that tell us, that reinforce weakness or failure. So whatever it is, any self-destructive thing that diminishes our true nature, that diminishes the joy within our own being. But the good news is, whatever we have set into motion, whatever bad habits we have created in the past by repetitive action that limits ourselves, we can reverse that. And just as Jyotish was saying, happiness is a choice. We ultimately have complete control over our behavior patterns. It may not seem like it, but if there are 3 steps to it. First, look at, analyze, discriminate about patterns in yourself that are limiting your happiness, and then make a choice. Do I want to continue this habit or not? And if you don't want to, second step is willpower, okay? We're going to take this seriously. We're going to start doing something about it. We're going to reverse that flow of energy that goes out in that direction. And the third step of this process is be perseverant. Don't give up, no matter how long it takes. Yogananda tells an absolutely delightful little story about the big frog and the little frog. I don't know if you're all familiar with it, but the big frog and the little frog were jumping along, and all of a sudden they jump, and they realize they've jumped into a big bucket of milk. And it's the sides of the bucket are too high, they can't get out. And so they just start paddling and paddling. And the big frog says, I'm getting tired, I'm going to just stop. And the little frog says, don't stop. If you stop, we'll just sink to the bottom and you'll drown. And so the big frog tries a little bit longer, and finally he said, I can't do it anymore, and glub, 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 and he sinks to the bottom. But the little frog just keeps paddling, and he says, as long as there's life, there's hope. Great dictum to live by. And he keeps paddling and paddling and paddling, and finally his feet kind of rest on something solid, and he's paddled around in that bucket of milk so long that he's churning. You're laughing, you know the answer. He's churning around, and he's created a lump of butter, and he rests on that lump of butter, and he just hops out. It's a wonderful image to remember when you think, I can't do this. I've tried so many times to change. As long as we keep trying, we will be able to accomplish it, because it's all about energy. It's about choice and energy. Recently, Swami asked me to, within the last year, asked me to work on a project and to write something. And I had the habit of thinking, I'm not very good at this. I don't know if I can do this. And so I said to Swami, I'm really not a very good writer. And he said, well, there's nothing to do then but roll up your sleeves. And that little bit of advice freed up so much energy in me, because I didn't have to think, I can't do it. I'm not good at it. Why try? I know I'm going to fail. He said, well, then just get started. And I thought, maybe I'm not a good writer, but I'm a hard worker. I'll just work at it. I'll just keep doing it and see how far I can get. And it just got me off, the sticking place, and got me moving on it. And so whatever you think, I don't know if I can do it, I'm not good at it, these are these are mental habit patterns that limit our happiness, that limit our ability to live in freedom and joy. One of our friends here trains acrobats at a very high level. And you watch those people and you think, how is it possible to do what they do? But they have to just start at one little place. And then, they, first with all sorts of guide ropes, and then you get rid of the support, and little by little you think, I can do this. And so we need to look at those habitual habit patterns and to realize that the law of karma, as Jyotish was talking about, what we put out in the world comes back. So let's say you have a tendency to be selfish, and you don't like it. You just notice, if there's 2 pieces of pie and there's 2 people, I'm going to take the biggest piece. That's just the kind of person I am. And you don't like that in you. Well, you do the antidote. What's the antidote of that? Even if you can't stop yourself from taking the biggest piece of pie, you say, well, I'm going to be really generous in other areas. I'm going to just, maybe I'll donate food to the food bank, or maybe I'll, whatever it might be. And so you just start putting out generosity into the world. And little by little, that starts changing your own habit patterns. It frees you. It's all about how bound you are by the karmic patterns you have set up in life. And as soon as you realize, hey, I can change these. It's not who I am. I started this, and now I look at it, and I'm not happy where it took me. I'm going to go back a little bit and start implementing, find the antidote for the bad habits that you have and do the opposite. If you sleep too much, then make it a habit. Swami Kriyananda said he, as a young monk, he went through a period where every time he sat to meditate, he just would fall asleep. No matter what he did, and he was getting him so frustrated. And so he said, okay, Mr. Sleep, we're going to war. And he said, I just stayed up all night. I drank cup after cup of coffee. I was writing letters. I would run. I would get up, and I just said, you are not going to sleep all night. And he said, then finally and it's like, I mean business. I am in charge of my life. And that's what I love about Yogananda's path. He gives us back our own power. Not to say I'm kicked around by my own bad habits, by my own past mistakes. We've all made mistakes. Sri Yukteswar said, the lives of all men are dark with many stains. All things in future will improve if we are making the right spiritual effort now. All we have to do is say, I choose. I choose to be free of these habits, and I will be moving forward past them. So, and what our karma has set into motion, remember in Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda's family, who was forever trying to discourage him from becoming a monk and living a spiritual life. They had an astrologer draw up a horoscope, and the horoscope said he would be married 3 times in this life. And Yogananda took that horoscope and he just lit it on fire. And he said, the seeds of past karma cannot germinate in the fires of spiritual practices. And that's the truth. Just that freedom to be happy and not to be self-limiting by past thoughts of failure and weakness. So that's one of the first happiness thieves. The second one is to avoid negative thoughts and words about other people, about situations. Yogananda said, if I wanted to start finding fault with the world around me, I could start and never stop. But why look at the sewers? Look at the beautiful light instead. And so we have the choice. Do we want to just, when we meet someone or we have a friend, who amongst us is, as Christ said, he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. Who among us does not have flaws and things that we wouldn't like to change? But if we can just, the nicest gift we can give to our friends, our close loved ones, is to see the best within them. I have a brother who went through a period of his life where he got lost in a lot of bad habits and quite self-destructive, and it's kind of a miracle he still has a good life today. But my mother was a very positive and open-hearted person, and she never, ever criticized him or rejected him or got angry at him. And sometimes I would get angry at her. I said, inside I would think, how can you not react to when he's doing all these things? But she would always say, he's looking for himself. He's trying to find himself. And now many years later, his life is very stable and happy. And he said it was our mother's faith in him that gave him the strength to pull out of all that. And so just, if we project negative thoughts, we live in a world of negativity. If we see the best and the highest, it's not that we're we're ignorant of what else is going on, but we just realize, I choose. I choose to see the world in a good light. And don't you know people who play both sides of that, people who are forever positive, and it's a joy to be around them. They're magnetic, and generally they're successful. And even if they're not, they're happy anyway. So to see the positive, and then I'm sure we all know people who, yeah, it might work, but. And after a while, you don't want the questioning all the time. Let's just assume that everything is good, even though we know it's not. And it's just there's a flow of energy in that. And Swami Kriyananda is really a wonderful example of this. We were just sharing this story recently that in the early years of Ananda, there was a woman who lived there, and she was one of the most difficult people that most of us had ever met. She just was domineering and opinionated and bossy and controlling and go on, and I'm doing everything I said we're not supposed to. But there she was. And we did the best we could to deal with her. And Swami was always so kind to her and supportive and acknowledging her and giving her a position of authority in the community. And I would think, doesn't he know what she's like? Doesn't he know she's driving everybody crazy? And then after she was in the community about 25 years, it was not a short period, she left. And just in the past few weeks, Swami said, she was certainly all of our test, wasn't she? But it was the first time I heard him admit that it might have been difficult. And so the more it comes back to choice and habit. If we choose to see things in a positive light, we have a little granddaughter now, and very positive person, and she just is innately gifted. One time she was staying with us, and I said she wanted a banana, and I looked in our cupboard, and I said, oh, well, the bananas are all a little past, they're kind of getting brown and all that. And she said, that's okay, Grandma, those are Dalmatian bananas. And I just thought, you're going to go far. You have the right attitude. But to be able to see life like that, there's a very funny joke that there were two shoe salesmen, and they went to a third world country and to where there weren't, most people didn't have shoes, and they got off the plane, and both of them immediately headed to their telephone. This joke happened before there were cell phones. And one of them telephoned his distributor and said, nobody wears shoes here, send me return ticket, no market. The other one got on the phone and said, infinite possibility, send 10,000 pairs of shoes. So, and they're both true, aren't they? But it just depends who had more fun in the process. So to really make the effort, if you want to be happy, see the world in the brightest possible way, no matter what happens, no matter what happens. And it's certainly, I'll tell a little story that some of you know. In 1976, Ananda was hit by a big forest fire, and the whole community burnt to the ground. There was very little left. It was 7 years into the history of the community. We'd been serving and building and trying to create a beautiful spiritual community for Master, and boop, in a couple of hours it was all gone. And I can't say I rose immediately to the challenge. I was kind of in a state of shock. And then I saw Jyotish and another wonderful person, Seva, and I was trying to be positive, and I said, well, where are we going to build the next community? And they both just looked at me absolutely steady and just said, what do you mean? We'll just rebuild here. And it was like ashes and smoke and ruin and disaster. But that was the fruit of a spiritual life, just to say, whatever has happened, we have lost everything we own, we have lost everything we have worked for the past 7 years, and here we are. We start again. And we did, and it was better than ever. And honestly, I would not have traded that experience for any gift in the world, because I realized Happiness is inside. I've lost everything I own. I woke up the next morning. It was a little disconcerting, but I was still me. That was good timing.
It's a very happy ringtone.
Okay, so let's move on to worries. Worries are wonderful things, aren't they? I mean, they're just like little squirrels in our mind, and they just they go round and round on those wheels, and exercise wheels. But Master had a wonderful phrase. He said, you should go, if your worries are really bearing down on you, go on a worry fast. Just like you go on a juice fast or a, whatever kind of a fast, fruit fast. You just say, okay, from 9 to 12, I'm on a worry fast. And I'll tell you, if you do that, it is the most freeing thing because you realize, again, it's a choice and that you have control over your own mental processes. I went through a period where someone who I was very close with was going through a very difficult time. I was very worried about this person, losing sleep over them, worried and what's going to happen, and oh, this could happen and that can happen. And finally, or maybe sometimes you've done it about your health, oh, what does this mean? Do I have something serious? Is it bad? What the doctor doesn't know. Anyway, in my situation, I just realized my peace of mind was totally being destroyed. I couldn't meditate. I couldn't find joy. And I thought, whatever happens, if the worst case scenario happens, let it be. But the most important thing for me is my own peace of mind. And I really disciplined my mind. Whenever those thoughts would start coming, I would say, no, I'm not doing that. I am just not going to worry about it. And furthermore, I just give it to you, God. Whatever you want to happen, I trust. I have faith that it's for everyone's highest good. And, in a very short period of time, that whole situation turned around. And everything I was worried about was just gone. But worries draw to them. They hold it in our place. If you're facing health challenges, I have a friend who just successfully dealt with cancer, and with a lot of grace and a lot of light. And I asked her, what did you do? Because I've been watching you, and this didn't pull you down. And she said, well, I didn't deny it, that it was happening, but I didn't entirely accept it either. I just tried to keep my consciousness as high as I could. And now she's totally well. But it was a very beautiful thing, just not to say, oh, it doesn't exist, and not to say, oh my God, this is terrible, but just to keep your mind as high and elevated as you can. And she just said it was actually a very, very strengthening experience. So with our worries, to really don't let them take control over you. But you just make the effort. How do we do that? It's not easy. The practice of meditation it provides such a wonderful tool in dealing with worries and not letting them consume your life. In the first place, it helps you through the practice of meditation to take control of your thoughts. So you're not just, you observe them and you can detach from them. So you can say, okay, this thought is going through, but I don't identify with it. I don't have to. So to control of your mind, to achieve a state of calmness. Again, when that fire happened, and some of you know the story, we had a geodesic dome that leaked pretty badly, well, quite badly, in fact. And Jyotish had lovingly built it himself, but carpentry was not one of his best skills at the time. Anyway, it was like a sieve. So right after the fire, the first time we had been in different places in the community when fire struck, and then we met, and I put a big smile on my face because I didn't want him to be worried, and he put a big smile on his face, and he said, "You know what? We don't have to worry about leaks anymore." And it was that calmness in the face of what for some people could have been an overwhelming setback, catastrophe. And just to be able to say, I can be calm here. Once we were driving with Swami Kriyananda, and he was driving, actually. This was a number of years ago. And we were driving up with a small group of people to go skiing up at Lake Tahoe. And as we were driving, it began to snow, and harder and harder. And finally we got up to, there's the pass, Donner Pass, which is the highest point where the Donner Party, I don't know if you know about them, but we won't go there right now. How many of you know about the Donner Party? Okay. They got stranded and some cannibalism took place, right? But anyway, we won't talk about the Donner Party. But anyway, so we were driving there, and then all these big signs started flashing, chains, stop to put on chains. And so Swami was driving, and he started to veer off, but the tires didn't have a lot of tread, and the car went into a total 360-degree spin along this very slick freeway with big trucks coming back and forth both ways. And there was a woman sitting next to me in the back seat. In fact, she was that same woman who, come to think of it. Anyway, so she was sitting next to Swami, or she was sitting next to me in the back seat. And so she started yelling out, "Swami!" And the car spinning and spinning and spinning. And then it crashed into the side of a Greyhound bus, which was parked along the side of the road. Nobody was hurt. The car was totaled. Nobody was hurt. And Swami just turned around and he said, "What?" And calmness, the fruit of meditation. And then finally, meditation helps us to deal with worries in that it envelops you in a sense of peace. You realize whatever happens, it's going to be okay. Because there's an underlying force in the universe, as Jyotish was talking earlier, an underlying presence of happiness and beneficence and peace, and it's all going to be okay. So that's why, people don't realize how much we get out of the practice of meditation. It says in the Bhagavad Gita, even a little practice of this inward religion, and that means meditation, will free you from dire fears and colossal sufferings. It's a very direct statement about why we should meditate. And so worries, bad habits, negative thinking, all these are happiness thieves. And then finally, I'll just wrap up and then we'll have time for some questions. Master talks about 4 psychological states which are happiness thieves. Jyotish touched on them in a way. The first one is sadness or disappointment. And that's when we really, really want something and we can't get it. I have a picture that I find amusing, taken of our son when he was about 8. And there was a big Easter egg hunted in Nanda. And there was a golden chocolate egg wrapped in golden foil that if you got that, that was a special Easter egg. And all the kids were looking for this golden Easter egg. And somebody just happened to snap a shot. Our son had his little basket, and there was somebody else found the egg, and he was just standing there like that. And I thought, that just sums it up, Somebody else finds the golden egg, and we're left with an empty basket, And that's the first psychological state where disappointment or sadness because we don't get what we want out of life. And then the flip side of the coin is false happiness because you do find the golden egg. So you get that golden egg and you eat it all down, and then in the morning it's gone. So it's like we get what we think we want in this world, and it still doesn't provide us happiness. I I don't know. In other lives, I must have learned this lesson about reaching out for things and not finding fulfillment in them, because as a little girl, quite little, under 4 years old, I would always have this reoccurring dream of a beautiful ice cream soda, and I would reach out for it, and I could never, ever grasp it. And I would have that over and over and over again, until finally it was like, as I got older, I realized it was some deep memory that you're never going to get it, and it's never going to make you happy. And so there's the false happiness when we do get it. And as Jyotish said, psychologists have shown with tests that happiness, if you win the lottery, if you whatever it is, 6 months, and then it's back to where the level of happiness you started out with. So those are flip sides of the same coin. But then there's a third state, which is kind of boredom or indifference. You get a little tired of the chase. You think, okay, I quit. I really don't want anything anyway. But then it will renew itself again within you. So it's like that kind of temporal pause of boredom or indifference, where you withdraw a little bit from the world. But that still won't do it. You see a lot of people in LA pushing shopping carts, with all their belongings in them, and they've kind of given it up. They've said, I'm not going to play the games of this world. But that doesn't make you happy either. So not by just merely saying, I give up, I don't want it. That's not enough either. And then the fourth state is a state of, so there's false happiness, boredom, sadness, and the last state is a state where it's sort of the sum of all of them, where it's kind of, you feel, well, this life is good enough. You settle for something less, compromise your happiness, and then you live your life and you stop looking for what you really want. But Master said there's a fifth state, and that's what we need to strive for. And that's the state of finding the bliss of our own nature. And someone gave a very nice definition of bliss. It's happiness without a cause. And so if we want to be happy all the time, we have to stop putting conditions on our happiness. If this happens, I will be happy. If this doesn't happen, then I will be happy. And all the getting and spending of this world, as Christ says in the Bible, people seek it here and there, but lo, the kingdom of God, of bliss, of happiness is within you. And we have to do the work to find it. We have to reverse all those tendencies that say it's out there and it's got to be the way I want it to be, and then, or otherwise I won't be happy. But the more we can say, Lord, I will work for this. I will work to rediscover the joy of my own being. And Master said that we are all like beautiful, beautiful diamonds, our soul nature, but it's encrusted with mud from years of indifference and wrong living. And what we need to do is simply wash off all the surface coating so that diamond of our own being can reflect out that beautiful soul joy. And when we can live in that, then as our Guru said, the yogi can stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds and live in a joy unconditioned by any outward circumstance. So we want to give you a chance to ask us some questions.
So we'll be happy to take your questions, and we'll be happy not to take your questions.
Well, it's really, you want to say, I want, oh my gosh.
It's not a karaoke thing either.
Thank God. Okay. I had read part of Celestine Prophecies, and it said there is no coincidences in life. So when I got this text that said, sorry, it's today, about how to be happy all the time, I have been suffering this incredible amount of pain over a lot of circumstances. My sister was diagnosed with cancer, but on top of that, she's doing amazing. I mean, she's keeping herself very positive and stuff like that. And I just had a 5.5-year relationship where on Mother's Day, the next day, he just told me he was done. And we had such a nice time. I didn't see it coming. And so when I sent him a message, he called me 4 days later crying, saying he was sorry, he was confused and this and that, but he needed to. Then I hadn't heard for an entire month, and I saw 2 calls from this person, and I didn't pick it up. I was kind of scared. If I wasn't ready to have him say, I'm just calling to see how you're doing, because I was like, how do you think I'm doing? You know, I was like, I'm not doing fine. So I didn't pick up the call. I just avoided it. But I sat in the park with my dog. I took the dog for a walk. I keep trying to, I thought, God, I'm not an actress, but I keep trying to, I'm going to work. I'm doing well. I'm smiling. And I'm just trying to get through. But this pain is overbearing. And so I sat at the park, and for some reason, 5.5 years, no, I hadn't cried over what had happened, and that's not like me. I'm very emotional, very passionate, very sensitive. And I'm like, why am I not crying? So I sat at the park, and it was so beautiful. And I called up my girlfriend, and I told her, one of my friends, I said, I'm going to go to this thing about how to be happy all the time. And I laughed. And then, as if it was a joke, but I knew it wasn't. I mean, I knew this was very important to me. It was just the timing of it was unbelievable. I said, okay, is this not something? You know, this is a message to me. So I started feeling like I was dying in the park. And I started feeling like, I can't take this. I think I would rather die because this pain is so... And finally, these tears just came down, you know. And I was like, oh, okay, God, forgive me. Forgive me for feeling that, because you've given me life. You've given me a beautiful life. You've given me 2 beautiful children. You've given me a comfortable house. I have this dog. I have a funky job right now, but I have a little something better than nothing. And I have a sister who's fighting for her life. And she wants to live so badly. And here I'm like sitting there at the park going, I just don't know if I can do this. And I've always been, I feel a very happy person and a very loving person. And I come from a place of love more than negativity and hate. But I had spoken to my ex-boyfriend, and I said, listen, I think we need to see each other face to face. I'm coming down to see you this weekend. Put aside some time. And he said, no, I'm 100% sure I don't want this. And it hit me. So I tried calling him, and he wouldn't pick up. But when he was desperate for me to call him back, I did pick him. I said, please give me that. The thing is, I ended up coming from an angry, negative place and said things that never come out of my mouth. F you! It came out like that. You know, I'm like, you are, you know, a DICK. Forgive me, everybody. And when I came from this loving place, there was no compassion. He had no, it's almost like, we're done. And as soon as I said this negative thing, he fed off of that and responded to me. Okay, well, I'll call you later. And I just didn't know. I still don't know what to think about that. I mean, I can only think of the character of him was very negative the whole time I was with him, and it was very hard. It was very much a struggle. And I should be happy because it's a blessing. I know it's a blessing in disguise, but the whole rejection of it and the whole of me giving my whole loving being and to have somebody just completely shut me out has been very painful. But I just couldn't believe that I would come from this place of love. It did not work. And I came from this place of anger, and it just completely, he responded. And I don't know really what I'm asking. I don't know what to think about that. You know, I just, it's been very painful. And so, I mean, I'm very grateful to be here. And this has been extremely helpful to me. And I will take it home, and I will work on it every little bit. I have thought of meditation because I know that when I did meditate, I did come from a calmer place. I was able to handle things better, but I was in a place where I can't concentrate, I cannot meditate, I cannot sit, you know. And, you know, I've been spiraling, and I've been obsessively thinking of all the worries, you know, and negative thoughts and hurts and pains and stuff like that. So, you know, I don't know.
Let's all send blessings.
Good.
So let's
Thank you.
surround.
What's your name again?
America.
America. I remember you from
Yeah.
last time.
Let's surround America with light and with love and peace. Really feel in your heart these qualities, and let's rub our hands together and chanting Om, send blessings to America. Okay, any
Very
other
good.
questions?
Very good.
I have a question. Was the ice cream soda root beer flavored or Coca-Cola?
It was
Well, every night she alternates now. One night it's root beer.
Odessa, see? Odessa. No, it was strawberry.
I actually have a real question. What is your suggestion? Those of us who are living in Los Angeles, the environment can be challenging at times. Just your thoughts on getting out of the city, coming up to Ananda Village, places like that, how it can be helpful.
Certainly, it can be helpful. Remember, one of the things that Master said is very strong is environment and company. And so coming away from a restless environment into a calmer environment periodically can be very helpful. If you can't do that, you can create a bubble of calmness around you. For instance, you don't need to listen to talk radio. Rush Limbaugh is not going to tell you how to be happy. Sorry, but that's true. So put in a tape of chanting or Swami's music and put a bubble of good energy around you. So create a good environment instead of a negative environment. And keep away. Remember, Devi said, don't let those happiness thieves steal your happiness from you. So cut off the stimulus that creates unhappiness in you. And then, as you've said, it would be very helpful to periodically come and be in company. I mean, here you've come tonight. Who does not feel happier now than when they came in, or at least have more of a sense of the direction for it? So it's partly because you've heard these teachings, but it's partly just good company and uplifting environment. So get into an uplifting environment as often as you can, and then also periodically come to Ananda, come somewhere that will give you that. But every day, go into the good environment of meditation.
And I just want to add one thing, and then we'll get to your question. With 3 points about how to survive in Los Angeles or any big city.
That don't include weapons.
First of all, when you leave your home, be conscious of surrounding yourself with light. We had some friends who were members of a spiritual order, a service order called the Holy Order of Man, and they would go out into inner cities at night, men and women, and they'd work with, people in the streets, whatever the situation might be. And we were talking with them. This was in San Francisco. We were living at an Ananda ashram at the time. And we said, aren't you ever afraid, to go out? And they said, no, none of us have ever been harmed, ever been injured in any way, but we never go out without prayer and meditation and really surrounding ourselves with light. So, if you're just driving around, there's, billboards, people, things, this, that, the other. And you have to go out consciously. You have to protect yourself from the vibration of the downward pulling energy. So that's one thing. The second thing is be a force of light in the world. When we were living in San Francisco, we had started a restaurant in another part of town, health food restaurant, vegetarian, and our people worked there, and then they would take a bus back to the ashram. Well, one woman was the assistant manager, and she was in charge of closing down every night, and she had to take a bus from through a very, very bad part of the city to get back to the ashram. And it would be like midnight, and she just was, a single woman on the bus. And she said, winos would get on and drug addicts, and it was really, really hard for her. She was scared. And so she went to talk to Swami Kriyananda, and she said, I just can't do the bus ride anymore. And he said, well, do you have any other way of getting back from work? Do you have a car? No. Do you have somebody else who can drive you? No. And he said, okay, well, if that's the only way you can get back, then when you're sitting on that bus, you find the most needy person, the most drunk or drugged or deranged or whatever it might be on the bus, and you pray for that person the whole time. And she started doing that. And after some time, she came back and she said, Swamiji, the bus ride is my favorite part of my day now because I'm consciously trying to be a channel for light and positivity. So be conscious, be a channel for other people, to help others. I have a little story that was and Divine Mother, God will protect you. When we're in Los Angeles, we often stay with a wonderful family, Lisa Kaz and her 2 daughters, and they have a little game, a card game, children's game called Apples to Apples. It's a very fun little game, and we play it with her 10-year-old daughters. And then we went back to Ananda, and I thought, I want to get one of these games to play with children and grandchildren. And so I looked all over Nevada City, Grass Valley for this little children's game. Nobody had it, and I thought, okay. And so then I spent a couple of hours in town doing errands, and then my last stop, I went to the drugstore to get some other things. And I noticed there was one line where there was a single mom with a little kid, and the kid was totally screaming, tantrum, out of control, and nobody wanted to get in that line. And so I said, okay, I'm going to get in that line. So I got behind the woman and the child, and I just stood there, and I didn't close my eyes, but I just prayed for them. I just surrounded them with light, and then I started closing my eyes, and I was just praying for them. And then I heard them leave, and I opened my eyes, and then I looked down on the counter, and there was a box of the game Apples to Apples right there. And I said to the clerk, I said, can I buy this? She said, yeah, some other customer came through and they decided they didn't want it, and there it was. And I just thought, wow, that was so amazing, because I just was trying to be a channel of light, and Divine Mother just said, I'm watching. Here it is. This is what you're looking for. And so we bought it.
Okay,
You had a question.
Oh, well, I was related to you mentioned about your friend having cancer. My mom was diagnosed with cancer a couple of years ago, and she had the same attitude that you mentioned, which is, I accept it. I don't know if I accept it. I have it. She just, it wasn't denial, but it was a consciousness, and the tumor completely shrunk, and she's religious on a good diet and so on and so forth, and she's spiritual. I was the one that was very worried, and it kind of drained me. That's why I started going to meditation, just so I could cope with the idea that, the person I love so much is now diagnosed with this, breast cancer. And her attitude was just like how you mentioned.
That's wonderful.
But I was looking for ways to just work with my own emotions to deal with it, because I did worry, and I was like devastated, and even though she is elderly. And the meditation has helped, and I think probably if I had a vegetarian diet to go with it, it would probably help a little more. But I just wanted to share that with you. That was her way, and she's still alive, and
Wonderful.
she's going to be 92 in August.
Wow. Just to touch on this, and then we'll close. Illness is something, it can be our karma, and, I've had a lot of people who are friends who are just beautiful yogis and beautiful attitude and, you know, got serious illnesses, terminal illnesses. And so it isn't like you're not, it doesn't mean, you know, if you have a serious illness that you're not spiritual. But it's more, we had a friend who was diagnosed with AIDS. And she went to Swami, and Swami gave her some really good advice. He said, and it's essentially what we've been talking about, don't identify that you are a person who has AIDS. Do what you need to do, but don't say that's who I am. And that's the essence of it, you know, and then it, whatever part of you can be freed of it, then they are.
All I know is her tumor was this big and now the doctor can't feel it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, it was partly medication, but it was her attitude. So I went to share.
There's a lot of, much more than we realize power of the mind, both for positive and negative.
Truly.
I'll end kind of with a,
One more question, but
with a story, which is,
let her ask the question, then you can.
well, let me just
Okay,
say,
okay.
Haridas's mom, those of you who know Haridas and Roma, there was some situation, she was worrying, and then it turned out all fine. She said, well, that was the waste of a good worry. In fact, all worrying is a waste.
Okay, one last question.
I can say something about the happiness and the habit. Sorry, my English, if you don't understand.
Do you want to
Years
say it
ago-
in Italian, and we'll
No.
try to translate?
No, I will
Okay.
try.
Her
Okay.
English is better than our
No,
Italian.
but
Oh, I
Graziella,
see, good.
Graziella could
Okay,
translate.
if I know, I will
It's-
ask. Years ago, I started to work about the happiness. Now I work on myself with Ananda. I don't know when it's become habit, this work. But the last 3 months, I was under the chemotherapy and emotion. And every Monday, I went to the doctor, and no, I had the visit. Oh, doctor, how are you? No, hello, how are you? I don't know, how are you? No, I'm okay. The last week I have pain here. I have feeling this. I was sick, but okay, now I'm good. And my daughter, okay, go to the chemotherapy, no? When you go out, my daughter says, Mama, be more tragical when you speak about, more dramatic when you speak about your pain, because nobody trusts you. And okay. Yeah, this is my story.
Okay. Martin, one last.
Last one.
Yeah, you said you were going to give us 3 tips for surviving in LA. I only got down the first 2 of them. What was
Yeah,
the
I
third?
did. I think I skipped one. What was it? So I said, consciously surround yourself with light, be a channel for light for other people. And what was the third one I was going to say? Don't breathe. No. But I think just essentially have an inner life.
Yeah, no, meditate and know that God is within you and equally within everything in LA. So don't reject. Just accept and know that everything is God.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, thank you all.